As week 4 draws to a close, just a couple of Monday night football fixtures to go, we look back on the weekend that has been so far and celebrate some fancy heroes with Ed, as usual, some rhymes and some puns.
Fantasy Heroes.
Dak Prescott was all out attack with a stack of 4 touchdowns and a smack in the mouth for anyone who doubted him.
Patrick and the Chiefs fell right at Mahomes in Arrowhead as the meek and mild Ravens were simply swatted aside.
Plenty of fancy points for Genty as he racks up 3 total touchdowns and goes from 0 to hero in the space of a week.
Strike up the saxophone, Kenny G is fancy relevant again. The 50% of fancy managers who started him will be looking to gain well in their leagues.
Definitely not poo-poo for Puka Nakua, 13 receptions, 170 yards, as he has his sights set on wide receiver 1 overall for the season.
If you're curious how George Pickens might fare with no land for competition, then wonder no more, as he hauled in 8 receptions for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns in a stellar Week 4 performance.
Do you know what I enjoy even more than rhymes and puns for our heroes, Ed?
Rhymes and puns for our zeros?
It's my favourite bit.
Fantasy Zeros.
Cam struggled to ward off his fancy demons with yet another finish outside the top 20 quarterback.
A big week 3 proved too big of a burden for Luther as he went backwards, turning 2 receptions to -4 yards.
The Browns defense made a molehill out of a Monty this week as he turned 9 carries into just 12 yards.
Week 4 was bad for Ladd with only 1 reception from 5 targets for McConkey.
AJ Brown looked a clown, and when his points are down, it makes me frown.
Tell me, Ed, is it sly to make Joey a 0? With -2 fancy points, if he does kick off, let's be honest, he'll probably miss anyway. 2 field goals, 2 misses for Joey Sly. He stumbled over that kick almost as much as I stumbled over saying -2 fancy points. But
you're not used to saying -2.
I know, exactly. It makes no sense. Can we also just comment? AJ Brown, for me, is now getting towards fantasy gremlin territory.
I know. He should be consistent. He's like an elite receiver. You shouldn't be like wittering or worrying about whether to start him. He should be locked in every week.
I suppose we did say in the off-season that the Eagles got a much sterner test on offense. They weren't really tested in quite the way they have been so far this season. Last year, we've seen it with Saquon as well, aren't we? I'm sure the Eagles will come good and they'll work those things out, though, as I'm also hoping that happens with the mighty Ravens. This is down as my...
Here. Meek and mild Ravens, I think is their new
name. No. Shush now. We've got to do this as my game of the week because we've learned a lot about both teams this week. I think moving forwards, a humbling defeat for Baltimore, which does raise questions about the fancy value of a number of players that you have had high hopes for this season. The Ravens' first offensive drive was clinical, like absolutely just went straight through the Chiefs, and up until the interception on the second drive, it looked like it was just going to be back and forth, getting touchdown after touchdown. First poor decision from Lamar, panicking and throwing straight into that easy interception. The third drive then was also a poor choice with the intentional grounding. From that point onwards, it was clear that Steve Spagnuolo had got a plan and it was going to work on the Ravens offense all day. The Chiefs look like a new offensive unit entirely with Xavier Worthy back in as well, really helping Mahomes stretch the field. 17.1 fancy points. I do love the fact that there was a lot of talk about no one starting Worthy this week after it came out. He was going to be in for a limited role. More for you if you listen to that. Patrick Mahomes surpassed 27 fantasy points for only the second time in the last 2 and a bit seasons. The last time he did that twice in a row before was all the way back in 2022 season at the very beginning. With Worthy back in the mix, with Rice coming back as well, it looks like we could be back to seeing the best of Mahomes again. This is just one game. We had question marks coming into it, but we've not seen him really in his groove like that for a little while. Pacheco Hunt-Smith, underwhelming in the run game. I think we've kind of just accepted that we crossed that out at the minute for the Chiefs. Mahomes looks like they're not this week, but Mahomes look like over the course of the season their most efficient runner. And I think the fact that Pacheco and Smith were underwhelming again is more on them than it is on the Ravens defense stopping them. Juju Smith-Schuster scored a touchdown. That annoys me. TikTok Smith-Schuster is one of my least favorite players to see do well. Travis Kelce back involved doing bits again as well. For the Ravens, Lamar left in the third quarter. The game was already done by that point, so we can't really judge him on his meager showing from a fantasy perspective on that. His injury has been described as not season-ending. That doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence for the next few weeks when that's what they're quantifying. Justice Hill was the RB1 for Baltimore. We said to start him fantasy game day. He came out and he did it. I'm done with Justice Hill now. I can't call when he has a big game ever again. I've done the impossible and picked Justice Hill to have a good game. 28.7 fantasy points. Currently the RB4 on the week. Derrick Henry was quiet again after a monster effort on that first drive. It looked like he was going to be back to the Henry of old for the rest of the game. Just didn't happen. I think we just need to lower expectations what we're going to get with Derrick Henry. And that's not just a Derrick Henry thing. That's a Ravens thing at the minute is impacting him. That's the first time he's had 3 bust games in a row since 2018. So it really is a barren spell for Henry. Zay Flowers flex-worthy again. Saw 8 targets for 74 yards. What's he like under what's likely Cooper Rush next week? To be confirmed. Mark Andrews also received 8 targets. But as the above, what is he going to look like with Cooper Rush? What's it going to be like if Isaiah Likely gets work back in as well? Chiefs are on the up. Baltimore are just lucky, really, that no one's taken the AFC North by the scruff of the neck and making it their own. So hopefully there's time to turn things around. It is a worry at the minute, though, for Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Baltimore, they've had 3 really tough games out of 4. Just lost to the Bills. They gave the Browns a hammering, and then another, a 1-score defeat against the Lions, and kind of ran out of steam against the Chiefs. And the issue with Baltimore is there's so much evidence over the past couple of seasons of them struggling in the biggest games, and they're not doing anything to put that to bed. I still think they'll probably win the AFC North, as you've said. Steelers, I think, are going to be their toughest competition. Bengals and Browns won't touch them. But look at who you've got coming up. Texans, Rams is a tough one, but then Bears, Dolphins, Vikings, Browns, Jets, Bengals. So a really nice run of fixtures where you should be winning games. However, you're going to have to do that with Cooper Rush probably. And I'm not as confident as I would be with Lamar as Cooper Rush, because he's obviously a different type of quarterback, because Lamar is so incredibly unique. But I mean, there's worse backup quarterbacks. Cooper Rush is solid, but he's obviously not Lamar.
Well, the last Ravens backup, Tyler Huntley, was a Pro Bowler when he had to play a significant amount of time. So greatness awaits for Cooper Rush.
Yes.
Before we move on, though, Ed, I'd just like to take a moment to ask people to give us a subscribe, a like, and a share as well. 4 shows a week, review show, weekly preview show, streaming picks, and DFS as well. So please do stick around and see some of those. Also, your game of the week, Ed, for the first time of the season, about to go neutral colours.
Yes. Americans don't really like draws, or ties as they call them. But this is what we got in this incredible game. Packers 40, Cowboys 40. Just the 7 points in quarter 1, as it took its time to build to that crescendo of 31 points in quarter 4. And not even overtime was enough to separate them. Of course, the big storyline was Micah Parsons returning to Dallas, and he's not going to look back on his time there with any fondness with that return. I think he used a naughty word when he was saying how he felt about it. He was peed off with the performance. I mean, a lot has been made about the respective fortunes of these 2 teams, but I think it's as simple as the Packers not being quite as good as they were hyped, and the Cowboys aren't as bad as many people kind of hoped they would be. It's somewhere in the middle, as it normally is with the kind of the highs and lows of the NFL. Fantasy perspective, both quarterbacks look on course for top 5 weeks. With not much to come tonight. They both comfortably had their best weeks of the season. Jordan Love bounced back well from that horror show against the Browns, and Dak's now had 2 top 5 QB weeks, 6 passing touchdowns and just 3 interceptions, a solid return for him, despite a couple of dodgy weeks. Josh Jacobs has had a quiet start to the season, but he made up for that this week. 2 rushing touchdowns and 4 receptions for 71 yards. In weeks 1 to 2, he had 1 reception for 4 yards. And in these last 2 weeks, he's seen 9 receptions for 113 yards. So proving himself to be a true dual threat running back. Emmanuel Wilson is also getting plenty of carries, 14 carries for 69 yards, but still not enough to be fantasy relevant. Javonte Williams continues to impress. He's RB6 as it stands. And 3 out of 4 weeks for him have been RB1 weeks, and I don't think we expected that. 2 receivers absolutely dominated, 1 on each side. Romeo Dobbs with the ultimate clinical performance, 6 of 8 receptions for just 58 yards, but 3 of those receptions were touchdowns as he comfortably outscored his combined fantasy score across the first 3 weeks. He was only started, though, in 13% of the leagues, so lots of his points remained on the bench. Then there's George Pickens, who made the most of CeeDee Lamb's absence, as we alluded to in Heroes. An uptick in his target share, which will probably drop when Lamb is back. So, kind of temper your expectations. However, it looks like he's currently performing way above his ADP. He was drafted about wide receiver 26, and he currently sits as wide receiver 5. Matthew Golden has had a couple of back-to-back 10-plus weeks, but he's still probably wary of giving him a flex spot. And Jalen Tolbert similarly boosted his fantasy score week on week, and 6 targets apiece in the last couple of weeks suggest he's a clear wide receiver 3 for Dak. Tight ends wise, Jake Ferguson, tight end 1 as it stands. Great week for him, 7 of 7 for 40 yards and a touchdown. And Tucker Kraft is tight end 5, much less consistent than Ferguson, with 1 mega week and 3 quieter weeks. And the 73% of you who started the Packers defense this week, you got the -3 points as a reward for your laziness. Stream your defenses, people.
It's becoming a catchphrase, Ed.
It is.
Yeah, I think we were saying earlier, it's interesting how this kind of game comes together with the narratives around both teams, and it's such in a kind of real clear focal point, such a big game ending 40-40. And it'll be interesting if we end up seeing them again later down the line, potentially. And they say it's the Micah Parsons show, isn't it? In that situation, that's where all eyes were, and it isn't what he would want in there. Dak Prescott, we spoke in the office how he seemed like such an absolute bargain when it came to where he was going in fantasy drafts. And he's just proving that is the case, isn't he? The return you're getting from a player that you were taking as your QB2, quite likely, or your first of a couple if you were going really late with quarterback. You're absolutely laughing, aren't you?
In a couple of leagues, he's become my go-to quarterback, and I thought that would happen quite quickly, ahead of someone who maybe wasn't. I was expecting to be a bit more reliable. And just to mention the Packers as well, can you remember a few weeks ago where I predicted my divisional winners, and the Lions' odds were ridiculous, weren't they? Compared to the Packers, and look, it's not a kind of I told you so, but it seemed bizarre to me that the Packers were so overly hyped. And now, I'd say the Lions look pretty much nailed on. That they've looked so good the last few weeks. But yeah, the Packers, I think will make the playoffs, but there's still work to do for them.
What I would like to talk about next this week, Ed, is a topic we mention quite frequently in draft season. That is year 2 wide receivers. So I just want us to have a little bit of a check-in at where we're at so far. So Marvin Harrison Jr., not what we were expecting, really, when you think about looking back to the player that was last year, ADP for rookie drafts, the 101 without hesitation. 4th pick in round 1 of the NFL draft last year. And he's the exact example of why there is no such thing as a sure thing when it comes to fantasy football. There are players that if you didn't take up the 101, people would question what you're doing, why are you not taking that? It's a stupid pick. And he's proven that actually there's several players if you take ahead of him, you'd have been better off at this point. This week, though, 8 yards from 4 targets in the first half and a horrible drop as well. But then made a great contested catch for a late touchdown in the fourth quarter. And that's kind of typical of what we've been used to seeing, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all in the same 4 quarters. My bold take on this, I think this key area of lacking is confidence. And are we ever going to get that from Kyler Murray throwing in the ball? That's the confidence. Everyone thought it was going to be such a good pairing, and it's just not happened, has it, at all?
No, he was outshone by several receivers last year. Really, certainly 2 who we're going to talk about now. And I think there were high hopes for him this preseason, but not quite clicked yet, has he?
Next up, Malik Neighbours. When I started writing these notes yesterday, it's obviously taken a horrible turn. I'd put before the injury is QB proof somehow. Like goodness knows how. And I put I really hope Dart is the real deal. But imagine how good he could be with a bona fide downfield passing threat. And then that devastating ACL injury, and he's out for the season. So genuinely gutting that we're not going to see him for the rest of the season. And for him in only his second year, when he looked to be one of the possible players destined for greatness at the position, really hope he is back and firing next season. Rome Odunze, most improved wide receiver by a mile this year from this draft class. Maybe being paired with Caleb Williams, who's growing in confidence. Maybe some of the other improvements in Chicago, but he's clearly Williams' favorite target right now. Wide receiver 3 overall, because he's just consistently putting up decent numbers every single week. So yeah, Rome Odunze absolutely is the poster boy of the year 2 bump for wide receivers. And I'm sure we will reference constantly next year. We go, who's going to be this season's Rome Odunze? At the minute, it is Rome Odunze. Brian Thomas Jr. has gone the other way. What's happened so far? So last year, 1,282 yards, 87 receptions, 10 touchdowns. There was a worry. Is Travis Hunter going to steal his work? That's not been the case. We were very hopeful. Trevor Lawrence has got it all in front of him now to take that next step. That's not happened yet. 12 targets for 4 receptions was odd in week 2 to be that unproductive. I'm not worried, though, yet. And much of this is kind of coming from a dynasty perspective. If you draft someone in redraft, they're not doing the business. You're not bothered about what's to come. You're not bothered about the progression. You're bothered about the points you get in this season and week in, week out. I'm not worried about Brian Thomas Jr. at this point. But if this is the picture for the rest of the season, I think he's going to see his stock massively drop.
It's T-Law, isn't it? I mean, I think the caveat we gave the start of season, a lot of people did, was it's reliant on T-Law having a good season, and we thought he possibly would be on course for that, but T-Law's not started well either, and his receivers not beneficiaries, whatever the opposite of beneficiaries is.
I think for Thomas Jr., he's one that is very much in the let's see how the rest of the season goes sort of category, though, because it could turn it around still. I just already seems destined to get around 10 points each week at the minute, which is no good for anyone really where he was drafted. Our next 4 then. So Xavier Worthy, we can't really tell at this point. Obviously, he's been injured for most of the season so far. So it feels hard to comment on the fastest player in last year's draft class. He has individual plays here and there last year that made you take notice and finished the season strong in those final 3 weeks. So he was 19 fantasy points in a row, weeks 15 to 18. He's someone that I'm still just putting a pin in for now, despite that showing against Baltimore yesterday. Ricky Pearsall, very high in the more off season, is shaping up to kind of prove us right on that. But I didn't anticipate it would be because of the number of injuries that we've seen. We know that the injuries at the 49ers were going to help him to get a role. But I think Kittle being out is the key contributor there, because he was the only real valid target challenge in San Francisco for me. He's another one. He's probably one to judge next year when he's had a full season under his belt. Other 49ers players are back and seeing what that role settles like. Keon Coleman, I don't really know what to say about Keon Coleman because he's only scored over 10 fantasy points in 5 games out of 18 so far in the last year and a bit. We've spoken about how Allen doesn't target a particular player, instead puts the ball where it needs to be. The problem is Keon Coleman isn't ever where the ball needs to be and certainly doesn't separate enough to be in that situation. So he just seems a bit of an anomaly still. Lad McConkey, I'm a huge McConkey fan. You will ridicule me on this frequently during the offseason when I'm banging on about Lad McConkey again. And his productivity has taken a big hit so far. However, it's obvious to see it's not McConkey based, it's not Herbert based, it's Quentin Johnston doing bits, and Keenan Allen obviously spent the offseason bathing in the fountain of youth because he's come back like prime Keenan Allen. His redraft value, absolutely, if you drafted him at cost this year, you're not happy with that, and you probably won't be for the rest of the season. But I'm not worried long term, especially from a dynasty point of view. Keenan Allen will not be around forever. Quentin Johnston, who knows? Is he going to be like this from here on in, or is he going to take a dip again? So for me, Lad McConkey is a player that if you're in a dynasty league and people are in a win now mode and want to move on from him to try to get something else in, absolutely, I would happily trade for Lad McConkey in dynasty, redraft. If I've taken him to my wide receiver 1, I'm probably a little bit concerned at this point. Who are you highest on out of those 8 then, Ed?
Yeah, Dunze has not proved me wrong. I wasn't. I just still thought DJ Moore was the target, and I thought Dunze would struggle to surpass him. And I've been amazed how quickly that's happened. It just seems kind of certain now that he's the number 1 target. Ladd and Brian Thomas are a concern from a redraft perspective because they've been drafted very highly. They're sitting in a lot of teams as their wide receiver 1. And you'd be gutted if you'd done that. They are a concern. Out of that draft class, there's some real talent there, isn't there? Real talent there, and I think they'll all be around for a long time to come. That injury to Neighbours is just sickening, really, isn't it? Because he's such a talent. Hopefully he comes back strong next year.
It just looked like the Giants are going to be really exciting to watch again. So from a neutral point of view, that's a real shame to lose him as well. Other wide receivers drafted on day 2 of the NFL Draft 2024. We have Jalen Polk, Adonai Mitchell, more on him later. Malachi Corley, Jermaine Burton, Roman Wilson, Jalen McMillan, and Luke McCaffrey. There's a clear drop-off, wasn't there, after McConkey was drafted, from what we've seen so far. But history tells us one of those players will probably end up being a force to be reckoned with at some point in the next couple of years. You always seem to have someone who has a year 3 or 4 breakout from nowhere, just as everyone's dropped him to waivers in Dynasty and has lost interest. So
I guarantee that won't be Jermaine Burton.
No, I think that's
that's 100% guarantee it won't be Jermaine Burton.
And if I get to clip that to make you look massively wrong, you'll be quite.
I'll take that. I'd love that. Yeah.
Before we move on, then, as I said before, please do subscribe, like, and share to check out the rest of our shows throughout this week and the season beyond. Fancy talking points, Ed, for week 4. What have you got for us after being glued to the NFL action all day yesterday?
I'm going to be brutally honest with the viewers that I was a little bit distracted by the Ryder Cup yesterday. I was flicking between both of them. So I've done my research, I've watched my highlights, but maybe I got a little bit distracted and didn't have time for another talking point. But you had another one you just wanted to mention. You wanted to talk about the Colts, didn't you?
Yeah, so I thought, seeing as you've been watching your romp to victory over the USA, for our American viewers out there, commiserations. I just want to say a little extra on the Rams taking out the Colts yesterday, but Indy should have won that game. And we said last week it was going to be really interesting to see what the Colts do against some proper defensive competition. I'm now happy to say that the Danny Dimes-led Colts are the real deal and could well be in the driving seat for the AFC South at this point. Danny Dimes did have a down week for fantasy. Much to the annoyance of someone who got very angry in our comments on YouTube for our sit short, saying it made no sense whatsoever to suggest sitting Danny Dimes, despite all the data pointing to the fact that the Rams were solid against quarterbacks. You're welcome. I await my apology in our comments. I also want to comment this that Adonai Mitchell lost this game for the Colts. Watching that footage back where I think he's kind of said he was swapping, he wanted to have his arms out crossing the line to get the touchdown and passing that ball out. Just why? Just wait for 2 more steps till you start to play silly beggars. There were questions about his attitude and everything before, and I know too much gets played into that, but you always question a player hasn't got the discipline to wait until they've crossed a line before getting cocky. And then the holding penalty that overturns the Jonathan Taylor touchdown as well. I'm assuming someone's had a stern word in the ear of Adonai Mitchell. I don't imagine that was Danny Dimes, though, because he looks like the most placid man on the planet.
No, some time on the naughty step for Adonai, definitely.
Injury report. Now, fortunately for injuries this week, we've not got the same roll call we've had in previous weeks, but as we've said, gutting injury for Malik Neighbours, out for the season with ACL injury. Hopefully, he will be back and fighting fit next year. There's a lot of posts going around on social media today about the number of ACL injuries at MetLife Stadium. I'm sure that will be rolled out time and time again on playing surfaces as well. Lamar Jackson, hamstring injury to be confirmed. As I said, when they say not thought to be season ending, that doesn't fill you with joy for the foreseeable future. But we'll have our main rundown of the injury books. There's a number of players kind of niggly left and came back in or were out short last minute, like Jalen Warren, that I know you're going to have a rant about in a little while. So we'll have a full rundown of our injury report at the end of this week on our streams show. But Ed, if we are looking for some players to pick up from the waiver wire, who are you looking at this week?
Yeah, as always, we've got 6 players who are going to be hot on the wire this week. But just before we start, beware of blowing your fab. Tale of caution number 648,692. Trey Tucker from 6% rostered to 72% rostered and started in 28% of leagues this week. 4.2 fantasy points. So
there we go.
Beware. And started on this week. Let's start off with Kenneth Gainwell, one of our heroes. He is 43% rostered. Had an incredible week deputising with Jalen Warren. I'm annoyed at, and I think a number of people were, because I think we were told he was suiting up. And I remember seeing alerts saying he will start this week, but he didn't. So obviously something changed last minute. One of my favourite stories of this is I saw a screenshot of somebody who's a commissioner in a league, and they basically said, what should I do about this? Basically, what someone had done is they'd woken up in America at 11 o'clock, realised that Warren hadn't started, and so he played him because he thought he was playing and he got 0 points. So he basically did the equivalent of rage quitting. He basically moved all of his injured players and rubbish players into his team for the rest of the weekend, so he would get a rubbish score. And so I just found that quite hilarious that he this person threw their toys out of the pram to such an extent because they were really mad at Jalen Warren.
That's never happened to me in a league because I don't play in leagues with 9-year-olds. That's the only possible reason I can think of.
He's actually quite a close friend. I was like, well, maybe you need to reconsider the friends that you have. But anyway, that made me laugh. But
shout out to the Fantasy Sanctuary, because the only reason I saw that was because on the Fantasy Sanctuary Discord chat, Tom Strachan put out that he was going to be out maybe like 15, 20 minutes before the game. So thank you very much to Tom Strachan for saving the day for many of us there.
Yeah, well done, Tom. Anyway, back to Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, if and when Jalen Warren's back, Kenneth Gainwell will go back to his week 1 to 3, plodding along, getting you a few points. So I wouldn't go crazy on your fab if he's available. Romeo Dobbs, 45% rostered, obviously an absolutely stellar week, but it's his highest ever fantasy score by an absolute distance in week 4. However, I'm pretty sure that is his 3rd ever 20-plus fantasy score, and this is his 4th season. So it's not going to be a breakout week for him. And, with the situation at the Packers, there's so much competition. Again, he's someone who is unreliable, and he's not someone you're going to confidently plug in every week.
We'll never get that from a Packers wide receiver, will we?
You won't. He'll have a great week, but he's not going to get that consistency. Darius Slayton, however, is, I think, someone you should be looking to pick up. Now, with Neighbours out for the season, sadly, instantly Darius Slayton becomes your deep threat for the Giants. And yes, Wan'Dale Robinson has looked very good, but I think Darius Slayton, I can't remember the stats, but when he deputised for Neighbours a couple of weeks last year, he got some big receptions, a couple of touchdowns, and I would be looking to get Darius Slayton in any league you can, because I think he's going to be a reliable target going forward.
Yeah, I think looking at the fact that he's kind of been all right, 8.1 points, 7.4 points, and that's when he's been sharing the field with Neighbours. Saints coming up next. It could be a decent week for him, couldn't it?
Yes, indeed. I think Slayton could be somebody to blow a bit of fab on this week. He could be someone you're slotting into a flex spot going forward.
Next up.
Yeah, Justice Hill, 11% rostered, and he should remain 11% rostered. Leave well alone. Don't be tempted back in by that big score. The only caveat I'm going to add here is it's been interesting, the uptick in his receiving work. That has been interesting over the last few weeks, but I still don't think he's going to be getting you massive points going forward, is he, Mark? Or
no, it's just, this is what happens. We said at the start of the season when we did our Ravens review show, at some point we'll talk about Justice Hill on the waiver wire. We'll spend loads of fab on him. 2 weeks later, we'll drop him because he's done nothing, and then he'll have another big game again. As far as I'm concerned, I got it right the 1 week on DFS. I'm done. If I can have a finished season with 100% success rate on Justice Hill, I've done the unthinkable.
Indeed. I mean, I'm sure you will mention it on the other show. Your bargain basket pick was absolutely stunning this week, Mark. Yeah. And I listened to you in one of our leagues. While we're talking about running backs, I mean, we have to talk about the young. He's a rookie running back. He's 24, Mark. That's too old for a rookie running back, isn't it? Did you want to have because you made some predictions about Nick Chubb and
yeah, Chubb was my start of the week, and this is the perfect example of having the process absolutely nailed down in what you're looking at, why you think something's going to happen, and then just getting the wrong player. So Woody Marks worked in, he had 17 carries to Chubb's 13, bit of receiving work as well. He absolutely benefited from the fact that the Titans are poor on defense against running backs. And yeah, it's interesting that Woody Marks looks to be the one that's going to be perhaps the person for Mixon to overthrow if and when he returns.
Yes, I mean, what seemed to be happening with Marks and Chubb is they were alternating drives, and I think that he's going to continue to eat into Chubb's workload. I think that's what's going to happen, and I think I saw an alert a couple of minutes ago on my phone about Joe Mixon saying that there's no timeline on his return. So Woody Marks could be quite a canny pickup in your leagues. And finally, tight end, we've mentioned him in a couple of shows, Brenton Strange, 33% rostered. He is your kind of archetypal low ceiling, but quite a high floor tight end in that you kind of guaranteed maybe 10 points a week from him, but not much more. So, it'll tick along as maybe a top 10 tight end, but you're never getting any big scores from him. But if you're in need of a tight end, he's someone who looks fairly reliable and is always going to get you a decent score on the board.
If you're watching this on Tuesday or later in the week, that's it. We're done for you now, because we're now going to look at Monday Night Football. So if you're watching this Monday evening, continue to stay with us. And Ed, you are up first with Jets Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, Monday Night Football is hardly a feast of football. Jets v Dolphins. One team will leave for their first win of the season, but don't rule out a draw. Maybe a 0-0. Can you have a 0-0? Who knows? I mean, locked in from the Jets' point of view, I think Justin Fields, if you've got any of these four quarterbacks on a roster, Fields is the one I'd feel most confident about giving you your fancy value. Bo Nix a close second, but he's had a rough start to the season. Really only seeing one full game, and then his 11 passes for 3 completions came against Buffalo. Garrett Wilson also locked in, but that's it for the Jets. When it comes to the Dolphins, Achane, Hill and Waddle are all highly started, but Hill and Waddle both still feel volatile. It's unlikely you've got wide receiver depth, though, where neither are worth a minimum of a flex spot. Waddle has only started in 48% of leagues currently, so maybe not. When we move into the should pay off category, the Jets, Breece Hall's done very little to give you confidence, but his week 1 16 points give you hope that at least there's a decent score in there. Dolphins, nobody in this category, although Waddle potentially drops there based on who you've got on your roster. And the best of luck category, the Jets, everyone else, although it's not out of the question that Mason Taylor has his first decent game this week, as Miami are giving up the second most fantasy points to tight ends, 17.23 points a game. Dolphins, Tua's a weekly sit or drop to waivers quarterback now, unfortunately. Maybe the bye week will make him playable again soon. Malik Washington's been interesting so far this season, but it's really risky if you're relying on him for more than about 5 to 7 points.
Yeah, I think Mason Taylor is going to be interesting because he's a player that we quite enjoyed watching in the off-season, in the draft process. And he's got a route to being really successful. And this could be a key game to watch for him. But once again, just because you do it yourself doesn't mean you can then do it on a regular basis. That'll be interesting to see. Ed, next up, I have got your Bengals versus the Broncos. So I'll be really blunt. Broncos should do well here, especially from a fantasy point of view. Fantasy points per game, Bengals give the second most to running backs, fourth most to tight ends, and middle of the pack to quarterbacks and wide receivers. Broncos aren't quite the dominant force they were on defense last year, but the Bengals are also nowhere near as potent as we've been used to with Burrow not under center. So, yeah, as you said, you've locked your rosters pretty much probably already. You might have a bit of room to move if you've got a few players in this games available. Jamar Chase, expectations are lower. That is fair enough at this point. But he's one of the few players that can pull a big game out of nowhere when all the odds are against him. So he's still starting Jamar Chase every single week. Broncos, Ricard's been up and down first 3 games. Cincinnati should be an up week for Bo Nix, I would expect. So you might be all right if you've got him in there. I think the way quarterback is, you may need that good game from Bo Nix. Sutton should also give you a decent return, and Dobbins looks to be a solid flex option all season now, unless Harvey emerges and challenges him for some snaps. Should pay off. Chase Brown is a huge loser from the current situation in Cincinnati, and this week will help us decide what we can expect moving forwards. I think the top season we'd hope for, completely off the table. Your hot take of the running back 1 overall, dead. Is if he does manage that now, I don't know what MVP is not a big enough award for him at that point. T. Higgins getting 2 targets last week is a worry. He's been starting in 52% of leagues this week so far at the time of recording. That's probably too many at the minute. So, yeah, T. Higgins is another big loser from that situation. Broncos, I'd bet on Mims or Franklin getting you 12-ish points. I wouldn't like to bet which one. So you're hoping for a bit of luck if you got either of them starting. I also had Engram as a start of the week this week, and I think he'll be in the mix of tight end 8 to 12-ish. So it just depends who else you've got available if you've relied on starting him or not. Of all the tight ends playing this evening, though, he's probably the one I'd be most happy starting. Best of luck, everyone else not mentioned as always, but quick mention for Mike Gesicki. He will have a decent game or 2 over the season. The 2% of leagues he started at the moment, I think you must be in poor shape with your roster if you're hoping that is this week, to be honest. And then Broncos, RJ Harvey, he's in here for now, but it just gives me the vibe of a player that could pop up at any moment and start to increase that. And we know that J.K. Dobbins' luck with injuries has been catastrophic over the last few seasons. So maybe RJ Harvey moves up in our expectations as the season progresses. That, Ed, though, is all from us for this week for our Week 5 waivers and Week 4 review show. We'll be back later in the week to have a look at our week 5 lineups. First week of some buys, so give us some trickier decisions to make in our fancy lineups. But that's all I've got to say. Anything you wish to add, Ed?
No, I'm just thinking about the Bengals playing tonight, and I don't really well. Sorry, I just got sidetracked as you were talking through that, thinking how bad it's probably going to be. But
just watch the Ryder Cup highlights again.
Yeah, I'll do that instead.
Right, that is all from me. It's all from Ed. So all that remains is for us to say, Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.